Come on board, my esteemed followers, to this new series tagged Web API Development using Clean Architecture series. I promise you a career growth as you follow these steps judiciously. So let's start by looking at what is on the screen for us. We try to use clean architecture in this our series, and a newcomer into development, software development, might be asking the question, what is clean architecture? So as you can see briefly on the board, it's a development approach which reduces dependency. So it is splitted into layer forms. Like we can see under this description here, we have the infrastructure layer, we have the application core layer, we have the presentation layer. All these things stand for major functionalities. The infrastructure, for instance, that is where the DB classes, which is the entities, are being defined. The database context, which abstracts the database functionalities, that is where it's expected to reside. The migration is expected to be there as well. So this module of infrastructure is basically responsible interacting with the external environment, which means as we progress since in the structure, you come across the application core. The application core, as you can see from this diagram, application core, that is where the business logic resides. So the real separation here is that if you are communicating with database, let there be a module, a session, a project that is responsible for that, which is the infrastructure layer project. The application core project does not have direct business with database communication. Rather, the abstracted functionalities is what the application layer needs to use. So in the application layer, which is the business logic aspect of the structure, we talk about the service interfaces, the service repositories, which is the concrete class, the classes that implement those interfaces, utilities like ability to send email, objects, classes that you are using to send email, read some Excel files. All these are logic that reside there. The DTO, the data transfer object, which maps what the end user is supplying from the endpoints to the entity that definitely will go into the database, so that to abstract the real entities from the front end users. So these are the structure. You have the presentation layer too. The presentation layer is basically a project like the web API. The web API does not have any business with the complete classes in the application core. Rather, the exposed interface is what the web API will consume. So in all this, you bring dependency injection into actions. That is why, as they are separated, one reference the other through project references. Then in the web API, you have to now inject all of them so that the functionality or the expected result of that application development will be met. So you, what we are basically seeing here, you differentiate the projects. You separate your projects. The infrastructure is separated from the application core from the presentation layer. So, and all of them come together through dependency injections, through project references to function as one to meet the expected goal. So, what is the business benefit or the benefit of this architecture? Why do we decide to go into it? It's been invoked for a while, but we see the relevance day in, day out. Loose coupling and separation of concerns or dependency is the major factor here, which means if the logic of an application is having issue today, we want to work on it. I will not have any business going to the infrastructure project. I will just bring down the project of the core, look at the logic that's having issue, fix it, take it back, and the solution will start working as expected without having an implication in the infrastructure, without it having implication in the presentation layer. So that ability to come up or pull out any of the aspects to work on directly is a major benefit of this architecture. So we talk of reusability as well. Any of the projects can be taken. Like infrastructure, you can take that infrastructure structure, project to another project entirely. It will still fit in without reinventing the wheel. The application logic too, you can replicate, you can take any important aspect of it to any project, you are able to work on it freely. So because of this separation of concerns, you discover that it is very much easier to test and maintain. Maintainability is major in this architecture. Then testability, ability for you can test the endpoint, which is the web API, independently of the business logic. You can test the interface and the concrete classes without affecting the web API, which are mostly the exposed controller in a JSON format. So you discover this plan or this structure gives us the flexibility to work perfectly on a particular project and assemble them together to make the expected result. So it's a very good one, and that's why we decide to look at it. Now, what are the technology we intend to use for this series? We are looking at ASP.NET Core, the Microsoft SQL Server, code first approach using repository pattern, entity framework to interact with the database, then C Sharp as the programming language, automapper. We are using automapper to make the DTO easier for us, taking what is coming from the front end and then mapping it to the entity or whatever we want to map it to make it easier. And we're using Visual Studio 2022. As we progresses, we shall be using Redis cache for easier retrieval of data. RabbitMQ/Docker, we shall be using it when we have messaging like our login. We want to be sending it through a messaging so that we will not lose any of them. So IS server is what we'll be deploying to at the end of the day. We shall be using nlog for the centralized logging. When we are deploying, we will deploy to Microsoft Azure and at the same time deploy to private cloud. So let's move on to the activities of the day. As you can see briefly here, this series is made up of 10 topics. This is the first of it. We are going to be using a simple project employee registration. And these are the activities we intend to be performing. We set up the like you can see, add project, infrastructure application, web API, then adding some basic or let me say some base packages that will make the entity framework call and the rest to come out using a simple Swagger to access the endpoint at the end of the day, then create further structures and the rest. So we will gracefully follow these activities to come up with the first project in this series. So please thank you as you pay attention. I shall now be opening my Visual Studio to take these items one by one. So be on the watch. So we start by creating a new project. Let's go to a blank solution. Let's search here. Okay. Look for blank solution. Okay. Let's label it employee registration. Employee registration. Reg for short. This is my location where I'm keeping the project. So let's create. Like I said, we are using Visual Studio 2022. Okay. So we have successfully created a project. Now, based on what we said, we have to add other projects like infrastructure, application, core, then web API. So these are the three projects we need to add based on the clean architecture we are looking at. So let's go. Add the first one. Let me see. Add a new project. Let's add the infrastructure first, which is a library. Let's use filter here to look for a library. Yes, we have library. This class library for .NET Core. Okay, that's infrastructure. Let's label this infrastructure. Infrastructure. So it's going to the same environment. So the nomenclature depends on you entirely. You could decide to use employee registration dot infrastructure and the rest, but I decide to just go straight. So let's use the long-term support for .NET 6.0. We have others. Okay, this 6.0 here, 6.0. We should have 7 and 8, but I'm using this for this demo purpose. So, okay, infrastructure is created. It's a library project. So let's go again to create the second one, which is the application call. It's equally going to be a library project. Let's add another one, another project. It's a library project again for .NET Core. Let's call this application call. Application call. Okay, application call. So going to the same, using the same version of .NET. All right, so let's try to add the third one, which is going to represent the interface based on our structure. Interface is a web API. Can I see web API here? Okay, ASP.NET Core. Okay, can see this ASP.NET Core web API application. Okay, let's use this. All right. Okay, let's call this one the API. For this API, it's a web using the evaluation tool. When we get to, we will enable the HTTPS when we come to authentication later. But for now, let's go this direction. Use controllers. Yes, we are going to use controller at the end of the day. So, all right, we have the three projects as expected. Okay, So the infrastructure, let's see what we need to do to get there. Let's remove this default class. Okay. All right. So for the infrastructure, we let's create a folder first. Like we see here too. We said, okay, let's first and foremost, let's add these items, entity framework core 6.0. Okay, let's add these references, these NuGet references before we move to the next. This is where we expect the migration. Yes, a communication with database to happen. So you come to your NuGet packages. So you need to use entity framework call entity framework. Let's see what we have here. Okay, so entity framework call. This is for the purpose of abstraction of database functionality. It's Microsoft Entity Framework Call is the first one. Let's use a very non-stable one, which is 6.0. I use 6.0 for this project. Okay, Entity Framework Call. Right. It's for database ability for it to be able to use LinQ queries and the rest as the okay, it has been installed. If you look at dependencies, look at packages here, it's already here. So let's install another one. They have the two, all of them, they have a different functionality. Let's see the tools. It's different work called two. Okay, it's different work called two. We have this. It's different work called two. 6.0. 6.0. Okay, let's install. Then we shall be installing the SQL server. That the SQL server functionality is to define the provider that we are using. To define the provider, we have the design here. That is the SQL entity framework called SQL. Okay, let me use SQL server dot SQL server. This is what Microsoft provider. This Microsoft provider. If you were using Oracle, you will see other nuggets to pick from. But for Microsoft SQL Server, this is the provider name we are using. Okay, let's go there. All right. Okay, thank you. Yes, we are done installing the base nuggets for this to make our program work as expected. So the next thing I want us to follow to finish one, let's create associated folders. When we get to application core 2, we will equally define, bring some nuggets into it and move on. So the next thing, let's create some folder for entities and the data communication. So you right click, go to add, have a folder. Let's add data first. It's where the DB context will reside. Let's move on again. Go ahead. Let's add the entity. Entity. This is what reflect the domain. What are we actually working on? This is where we have to keep all of them. So let me go to this data. Let's create a class there that will be communicating with the database directly. Create a class. Let's call it app db context. App db context. So this one is where the actual mapping to database, creation of tables, and all of that will be taking place. All right. We have to make it public to be able to be seen elsewhere or from outside. Public, sorry, public, right? So let's have a constructor for it. Have a constructor. City. Sorry. Okay. And then come to this. Come to this create a constructor class there. A constructor for this class. So let's go to entity. Let's see what we are expecting in the entity. We shall be expecting just few things like the base entity. The base entity will be talking of those things that we do not want to reinvent across board. So let's have a class on base entity, CS, base entity, base entity. These are feeds that we expect to be changing any time. I mean that once you are coming into the environment, it must have something that will be used across board. I will call it the base. We are going to be inheriting from it. So we, as part of the registration process, we are expecting a departmental setup where the employee will belong to. We have a department. Okay, let's call it department. It's department.cs. We're going to make it public. By default, it's internal. It's not expected to be seen outside. So let's have the basic item to be registered by the basic information to be registered. So we have a employee basic info. We have it. Employee basic info. So these are just going to be few items that we'll be using here. So this is where we'll probably be doing most of the major work today. So to start with, we will have a here we should have the ID. It's going to be an integer. Have an ID. It should be unique. Have a string. Let's name this one staff ID. Have the staff ID and duplicate this to make it faster for us. Depends on the number of additional items we are looking at. We have staff ID. We have the first name, last name, staff. Okay, let me say first name, last name, first name, last name, first name, last name, email. So not to waste much of our time, let me just quickly populate this. So the base entity has been defined. Like I said, the functionality of this is to ensure that wherever you inherit it, we have the date there, the date that the whatever that is used for is created, the date when modification is done is reflecting, the active status if it's delete. So these are the things we want to be going across every other entity or entities in the solution. Like the department, you can say it's inheriting from it, which means when we create department now, you are going to see those feeds there. And each time you are creating a new department, the date it was created the who modified it, the last time it was modified, all those things will be there. The same thing goes with the basic employee information. When you create this employee, for instance, my staff ID, name, and when you create me as a user or as an employee, the date it was created and all other information need to flow into the table. So we don't want to be inventing that way each time across the objects or classes. That is why we put them in one place. So that is one of the advantages of reusability when it comes to objects. So we have done the entity. So let's add the DB context. Let's add a constructor, CTO. Okay, we have a constructor here, and we need to inject a DB context object to it so that it can benefit from. Okay, first we have to inherit from the DB context. It's coming from DB context. It's coming from the entity framework context. The context. So let's resolve this entity framework call. Yeah. Okay. So let's inject the DB option here. I have a DB context option. DB context option as seen here. So we have options which have to into the base. Okay. So have to pass this in. All right. It's one of the ways to instantiate this class. So we have to bring the DB set, which is to create the table in the database based on the objects we have here. Let's do public DB set, DB set entity name. We have. Let's start with the department. Start with department. We have a department here. Department SDB context. Okay. Department. Let's use plural for it. The database is going to be the name. Let's uh, get and set there. Let's set it. Okay. So I think we need a resolution coming from infrastructure entity. All right. So we do the same thing. Let's do the same thing for the employee info. These are what we want to be created in the database. So I can have SC as well. Okay. Have one method that we can use to manipulate indices. We can use it to manipulate other things that we want to be unique in the table. For instance, you see staff ID. We don't expect the staff ID to be duplicated. This ID is already a key. We cannot make this one a primary key again too. We don't want the email and phone numbers to be duplicated. So these are the few things we can manipulate through this next method. This protected override. Want to override the expect feedback return object there. Uh, it's model it's um, model creating model creating creating use model builder. builder, call it builder. All right. Is base dot model model creating with this builder. So we can now add one or two things that we can quickly manipulate in this table. Then we move ahead. So what we have done here is some. I have to bring entity, the employee basic info. Like I said, I'm altering the index, which is before it's supposed to be only the ID that probably will not be able to repeat itself. But I am saying phone should not equally repeat itself. The staff ID not repeat itself. The email will not repeat itself. So also in the department, when you create department, we don't expect the name to repeat itself. The department name, if it exists before, you don't need to recreate it. So this is what we have been able to do in terms of the infrastructure. So in summary for infrastructure, the entities that will eventually form the database tables, they are here. The connection, this is the abstraction of the database functionalities. Ability, you can see I reflected the objects here. These are the objects, and at the end of the day, they will be created in the database the way we are seeing it this way. So this is one of the benefits or the beauty of code first. Once you get your objects right, you are very sure the database will follow. So that is what we have done for this. So let's quickly move to the application call. We might not have much to do on the application call for now. Let's delete this default application call. We shall be just the structure of what is expected. Let's add some folders to the application call. Let's add some folders. Okay, new folder. Let's have a services. Inside the services, we equally need to have subfolders that will interfaces, talk to interfaces, interfaces. Okay, let's have an interface here. This where interface that will be exposed to the controller will reside. Then the country class using the repository country class that will consume this interface. This is where they equally reside. Let me add the DTO here. The DTOs is where the data transfer objects will be done. Whatever we put here, the for the response and request, we shall be consuming it here. And then we look at utility folder that will hold some other utility functionalities for us, like maybe sending of email, reading of some doc files and the rest. So utilities. So let's have them. This is more structure, but as we move on, we will see the benefits or the reasons why this was being done. So for the web API, we do not have much, but let's see what it's already having a default controller, which is on the weather. But right now, we just want to be able to do migration, check the database today, and that will be the end of our program today. So uh, what do we add here? I need to add a NuGet package so that when we run this application, we'll be able to see it outside in a Swagger format or form. So let's add just one package here. It's a swash. This swash, swash buckle, ASP.NET Core. So let me get swashbuckle.asp.net core. I'm not seeing it. Okay, a minute. I think I got the name wrong. Swash, swashbuckle, swashbuckle.asp.net core. Swashbuckle.asp.net core. Okay, let's install this. This will make it possible for us to. Okay, an error. No, I think it's gone. It has been installed. Okay. So for us to get the benefit of what we have done, we need to quickly define the, the connection string and as well update the program file. Then we test what we have done. So let's go to, okay, first I have to update the settings here so that when we run this application, it should be able to use Swagger instead of going through this controller that is there already. So we can use a Swagger. When it is run, it will go to swagger.index. So the same thing here. And say swagger slash index dot html. Let's do the same for that. Right. So let's go to the application config for it. So let's define the connection string based on the database that we're using. Connection strings. So, all right. We have a let's have a key value approach. Let's have a default con for connection. Where we're going to be having the server name. Let's say our server. We're going to use a server authentication. Multi-window authentication. We have server equal to, let's use localhost. Local host. Host. Server is localhost. Let's use a database. Database. Instead of this capital letter. Database is equal to, let's use a employee reg. Okay. The user ID based on my database. I'm using a SA, and then where's my password? Password I'm using 101. All right. Haven't done this. We need to now map this in the program file. So we are going to call a connection to this, and we should be done. Okay. Let it come before the builder itself. Have a, let's say, var connection CNN is equal to builder builder dot configuration dot builder dot builder sorry builder configuration dot get connection string dot get connection string. So the name we call it in our app setting is default con. So let's go back there to put this here. Okay. And the next thing is the provider we are using. The context, we have a builder dot add builder dot service, service, builder dot service dot add context, builder dot service dot add db context, add context, context, add db context. You have to bring into business the object here, which is the data object. Okay, before this, for all these things to for them to make meaning, or for the solutions to be able to see themselves, I need to add them as a reference. Infrastructure is not referencing anything. The application core will reference. Okay, let me go to dependency. We have a project reference. Infrastructure will reference. Uh, sorry, the application core will reference the infrastructure to be able to have access to the abstracted database functionality. So the web is going to be referencing all others. The web, let's have a dependency here, project references. It has to reference the core, it has to reference the infrastructure for it to be able to see some items there. So we the from infrastructure, we need to bring this up. Infrastructure, the DB context, let's pick the DB context name. So in the program, this is what shall be passing to it. Let's resolve this, resolve the name. Okay, from infrastructure data. Then we have the provider option we want to use. So say under expression, have a option, put the option. Okay, let me call it options. Have a options, sorry, options, options dot SQL server. Use a, it's going to use a use SQL server. Use SQL server. SQL server. Then it's going to take the connection string we just defined. CNN. Maybe CNN. So let's try to resolve this. So resolve this and move on from entity framework call. So having done this, this is the way we bind the database objects together, the connection string and all. So having done this, we said something about the swagger before. Let's quickly reflect it here so that when we deploy, we can see something coming out. Builder.service, builder.services dot add, add, add endpoint, endpoint API Explorer. Okay, okay. Builder, builder.services add swagger gen. Should we add swagger gen? Okay, right. So let's move down to come and specify this development environment. Okay, after the build, let's put a small condition. If this app dot environment dot development, we say develop environment. Let's show the swagger app. Let's use the app dot swagger dot use swagger dot use swagger. Okay, use swagger, then swagger UI app dot use swagger use swagger UI. So this is basically what we need. So we shall now let's compile and try to let's compile to see if everything is fine. Let's build. Right. So let's quickly have a we have compiled it. Let's see the compilation again. Let me try to quickly rebuild. Okay, okay, rebuild is successful. So let's try to run and see the web API coming out. We have not done the migration. Let's try to run it. Okay, project with output type of class library. Okay, the class library cannot be the starting application. We have to make the web API to be the starting application. Let's go to the properties, then change the startup there. It's a single startup. Let's see it. Let's try to quickly run it and see. So, all right, I think it's coming up. Okay, let's go into the Swagger endpoint straight for us to see what we have done. So the only controller that is there is this weather forecast. So that is what is there for now. That's exactly what we are seeing. Okay, we're on course. So the next thing is let's do the migration and see if the data will be in the tables will be created in the database as expected. So that is the next thing now. So the next on the activities is to try to do a migration. For us to run a migration, we need to SQL, maybe opening my environment. For us to do migration, we have to go through tools. Let's open the NuGet console manager. Console, okay. Uh, let's use this command. The console window has opened. Let's add this command, add dash migration. Migration name will be first migration. Let's put it this way. Migration is expected to go to infrastructure. So to go to infrastructure, where the DB context is. Okay, unfortunately, your startup project API does not reference. Oh, sorry, we supposed to add this NuGet package to the startup project, the web. Let's quickly do that. Let's quickly do that. NuGet here. We do that. Let's quickly do that. Okay. This is the design. It need to be installed. It's not necessarily. You don't need to install it in the infrastructure, but for the web API, which is the first, the startup projects need to have it. So let's quickly do that and see. It's my where we are with that. This is my database. Oh, 001 database environment. Show that if you look at it, the name we gave in our connection string, the database name we gave in our connection string is what again? Okay, it has been installed. Connection string, the name we gave was employee DB. So if we look at this very well, I don't think we'll see employee DB. If you look at the tables here, there's no this is D, there's no employee DB. These are the few tables I'm having here. When we run migration, we expect that it should come here. So let's see. Let's try to run migration again. All right. migration. Let's see. Hope it runs this time. Hope it runs. We use the command add migration to run migration. Okay, that's good. These are the tables created. The department table, let's see, the employee table, all of them have been created as expected. So let's try to update the database. Update dash database. Update dash database. Let's hope this runs smoothly. If it runs smoothly, we should be able to see the tables as expected in the database. Keyword not supported. User ID. Yes, user ID. Oh, sorry for the. I think I made mistake in the app setting. Connection server equal to this. Database equal to be user ID. Sorry, it's supposed to be equal to user ID is equal to SA. Okay, password is equal to. Sorry, I used the wrong in there. Okay, let's see again. Update the dash database password. Password equal to. I don't think I have a password. Okay, we created. It's done. So when I refresh my database now, it is expected that I will see the created table, which is the approach of code first. Is my employee reg. So you can see the database and the tables are there. Tables, you have the department. When you open the department now, you are going to see the feeds as expected. See the feeds as expected. Department, where's my let's script? So let's select. Okay, you can see even the base entity that we inherited, the created, modified date, all these things are here. So for the same goes with the employee basic information. All right, you can equally see all the feeds here. So this is where we'll be ending today's session. If you look at what we itemize here as the activities to be done, we've apart from the entity framework called design that I did not put here, we successfully brought all the nuggets into the applications as expected. We created folders for entities, for the DB context. We made project references across board. We ensure that the core, the application core reference the infrastructure. Then the web API referenced the tool. So we updated the app settings for connection string. We did the API, then the program file, then we run migration, we viewed DB, we ran a test application. So this is where we'll be stopping today. By His grace, our next topic will be developing a simple CRUD. This department, we need to be able to create departments from our API. We need to be able to create employee from our API. We should be able to delete. We should be able to update. So those are the things we'll be doing in our next topic. So thank you very much for following my channel on web API development using clean architecture. I hope we have the understanding of our coverage today. Please kindly hit the like button as a way of encouragement to me. I hope to do very well at the end of the day and to make mostly developers that are upcoming developers to be very, very reliable and get the best the industry can offer. So thank you very much and I appreciate your time.